Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here with us this afternoon. We got several things to talk about. We're going to begin by talking about COVID, of course, talk a little bit about the election again, and then a couple of projects that I did post about on Facebook and Twitter in the last few days. Just thought it might be something they're really good projects. I thought it might be something you'd be interested in knowing about. So let's start here with COVID. So yesterday, this is new cases in the city of St. Louis. Yesterday we had 37 cases. The day before we had 66. The day before we had 45. So those are 3 days of increased cases, pretty significantly increased cases. Now, we've seen this before. Once in a while, we'll get, those spikes. But so we'll just have to look, watch this week and see whether or not that was a blip or whether we really have something going on here that is that we sure don't want to see. Unfortunately, we did also report yesterday we had one death, COVID-related death. We have not had a COVID-related death in 11 days, and so that's good. But unfortunately, one person yesterday their death was attributable to COVID. Now, looking at the hospitalization numbers, which I think all of you know by now, lagged 2 days behind. And currently hospitalized with confirmed COVID positive, 278 people. That's up from where we were, say, the middle of last week. We were at 246, 258, and then 274, 279. So here we are yesterday, up 2 days behind, up at 278. 70 people were in the ICU. 49 people were on ventilators, and in the region, number of people admitted to the hospital 2 days ago was 38, and that number has been pretty consistent for about the last week, and then again 36 people discharged. So more positive cases than we'd like to see, of course, and more people in the hospital than we'd like to see. Basically, though, still at a plateau with regard to cases. Now, still, I should just point out, still most of the cases for the last month are people in their 20s and 30s. People in their 20s, close to 30% of all the positive cases are people in their 20s. And about 20% of all the positive cases in the city of St. Louis, we're talking about here, are people in their 30s. So that hasn't changed in a couple of months. Our positivity factor, for those of you that track that kind of thing, it's being talked about more and more on the news, but St. Louis city positivity rate is running right about 5%, just a little under 5%. That's been pretty consistent for a while, and that's a pretty decent rate. I once in a while I find it interesting just to look back and think about this. In the city of St. Louis, there have been 124,000 COVID tests. Now, some of those might be 2 tests to one person, that sort of thing, but 124,000 COVID tests, of which 114,000 are negative and 9,838 were positive. So that's our 7-day average positivity rate is under 5%. So that's COVID for now. Election is 3 weeks from tomorrow. And today, we've been talking about this for a while, so it seems like this would have already happened by now. But today, the remote absentee polling places at the public libraries opened. And there's 4 different places: Booter Library, which is 4401 Hampton; Central Library, downtown, 1301 Olive; Julia Davis Library, 4415 Natural Bridge; and Schlafly Library, 225 North Euclid. The libraries are open from 11 to 5, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. So 11 to 5. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, they're open from 1 to 7. So those hours might be helpful to some of you who may want to go after work on Wednesday or Thursday. That is remote absentee voting, in-person absentee voting. It's all electronic voting, no paper ballots, because you can, no matter where you live in the city, you can go to any one of those 4 locations and vote absentee. To vote absentee, you do have to have, maybe you think you're going to be out of town on election day, or you're a poll worker, or you're 65 or over, or you have an underlying health condition which makes you susceptible to COVID, and therefore you can vote remotely absentee. So that started today. I guess it started at 3 hours ago, 11 o'clock in the morning, and at those 4 library locations, it'll go till 5 o'clock. And last thing that I want to talk about, 2 projects. Now, I posted these, as I mentioned earlier, and it's kind of interesting. I try to post things that I think maybe people aren't aware of. Sometimes, and it was the case in these 2, social media doesn't really seem to look at them that much. But I think these are important because the first is St. Joseph Housing, which is in Dutchtown area, and they are taking formerly LRA-owned homes, renovating them, and then selling them to a low-income family who might otherwise not have the ability to buy that home, and helping with the financing and helping with the furnishing, and really just trying to help stabilize folks by doing a really good renovation job on these formerly vacant, derelict houses. And that's, I think, a big plus. And the other, and if you want to read more about it, you can go back a couple of posts on our Facebook and our Twitter. The other is the Kransberg Arts Project, which is in a nearby neighborhood, Gravois Park, same general area. And they are, over the next couple of years, they are going to do 20 houses, and mostly for rent to artists and other folks in the neighborhood. And you might be thinking, well, that's only 20 houses, or that's only another 10 houses, but 30 houses in a fairly small area can really make a difference in terms of how that area feels, particularly when you're taking a house from a vacant house to renovated and occupied. And when you do several of those on the same block or on a nearby block, you do a couple of things. One, you give other neighbors their confidence in the area, and sometimes that spurs them to stay and to invest in that neighborhood. The other thing it does is it can totally stabilize a block by having that 1 or 2 houses done. So I just think that when you're thinking about, 30 houses can be a big deal in a neighborhood and can really help turn that neighborhood around and prevent these vacant homes from becoming worse and worse and worse. You all have heard me say this before. Nothing good happens in a vacant building. Everyone here in the room with me is laughing because, they've heard that so many times, but it's true. Nothing good happens in a vacant building. So when you take these vacant homes and convert them into either home ownership or good solid rental for folks that are thrilled to be in the neighborhood, engaged in the neighborhood, you make a real difference. So those are 2 projects I want to point out to you. If you want to read about them a little bit more, just go back a couple of posts on our Facebook page and Twitter, if you're on Twitter. And maybe even Instagram, I think.
Probably.
I think, maybe Instagram, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, that's a couple of really good news things that we talked about last week. And of course, the thing that's getting the most attention and the most traction, and we're very excited about it, I'll just mention it again, and that is the tiny house project for veterans with the Veterans Community Project. And so we're very excited about that. We think that that is a real great partnership for us to have. And frankly, it's primarily private money. And there's some state money in there, thanks to Senator Jamila Nasheed. But that's going to make a real difference in the lives of 50 homeless veterans who, when they go into the tiny house, there are social services, there's help to help them get back on their feet, and ultimately, it's not to stay there, but to then move on into their own apartment or their own house to get back on their feet. So that's just a few great things that are going on in the city of St. Louis. So now I'm guessing there are questions.
We have a couple of questions. So first, about hospitalizations in the region, Mayor. If they continue to go up, or rather don't come down, do you anticipate more restrictions and maybe reversing Halloween activities this month?
You know, I certainly hope we don't have to do that. It's not out of the realm of possibilities, but right now what we see when we graph this is it bumps up and it bumps back down, and it's up and it's down and it's up and it's down. So that is, I'm not saying we wouldn't do it if we had to do it, but right now we're not seeing a trend that makes us think about doing that.
Kenneth notes that over the weekend, the state of Missouri reported 5,000 new cases in a single day, but later stated that that was incorrect. What is to be believed, and does that have any impact on our reporting?
Well, first of all, as soon as that broke, Dr. Edwards let me know that that had no impact on our numbers because we're tracking our numbers independently of the state system. I don't know exactly what caused that. They dubbed it an extraction error or something like that, so it sounds like some computer error. For the city of St. Louis, we're confident in these numbers, and the state reporting doesn't have an impact on us. But certainly that is a very frustrating piece of information, and I'm sure the state's frustrated by it too. But you know, as we all try to rely on the data and rely on the science, which we keep saying all the time, we got to have good data. And so our data in the city of St. Louis we're confident of, and I don't think the state has published a correction yet. They just said, oops, that's not right. So we look forward to seeing that.
We have a question from Bill, Mayor, about bars and restaurants in the Grove who would like to stay open past 11. They need money to be open later. Any thoughts on the lifting of the 11 p.m. curfew?
It's something that we, Dr. Eccles and I and others are talking about constantly. You know, we have not made a decision to lift that 11 p.m. closing time because our numbers just aren't there. Okay, next question.
Dorothy has a question, Mayor, about the eviction moratorium. She says a woman on her street did get evicted. How is that possible with a moratorium in place in the city in St. Louis?
So, you know, I may have seen this question on Facebook over the weekend, and, you know, I don't know the name of the person, the address, or anything like that, so I don't know the specific situation. There are a couple ways that could be possible. One is that the being behind on the rent did not occur during COVID. It may have occurred before that. Maybe it was last November, December, January. I don't know. That's one way. And then secondly, there are a few exceptions. So if there's any criminal activity or property damage, that's also possible.
Schools, Mayor, we've had questions about the latest on schools and when they will be transitioning back to in-person learning.
So you all have probably seen that many districts are beginning to transition. Excuse me. And in St. Louis Public Schools, I just learned that they will be bringing back pre-kindergarten through second grade on October the 19th. Did we find a link to that? Okay, we're going to post this. And third through sixth grade will start back on October the 26th. So the 19th is just a week from today. They have not announced yet what they're going to have for middle school or for high school, obviously after this. So they're beginning with the young kids first, pre-kindergarten through second grade, starting next Monday, and then third through sixth, starting the following Monday. Everybody believes that it's best for kids to be in school, especially little kids. And so, as you've seen in other jurisdictions and other districts, not just in St. Louis, but across the country, you've seen that usually starting with the littler kids, so that's good.
So we have questions on other topics, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
First, with the change in weather, we did get a question about what about leaves? Do people blow them into the alley? Do we put them on the street for pickup? There's going to be a lot of leaves on the ground soon.
Leaves. You're taking me back to my alderman days when I would answer these leaf questions. So, put them in the yard waste bins that are dumpsters that are in your alley. That's number one. You know, if you can rake them onto a sheet or plastic tarp or something, it's pretty easy to take them to the alley and put them in the dumpster if you can. Some people will chop them up with the lawnmower and then do that because it mushes them down a lot. On street sweeping day, we do sweep leaves off the curbs. So that's one day a month. It'll be posted on your street, almost every street. But to do that, you got to have your leaves raked out into the street, not on the grass, not on the tree lawn, but actually into the street. So when the street sweeper comes through, it can pick up most of those leaves. Now, I know and you know that if your street sweeping day is a month away or 3 weeks away, to the extent you can, you might want to just get an old sheet out there, and if you can blow them or rake them onto the sheet, and the more you can put in the dumpster in the alley, the better. And they'll pack down pretty good in there, you know, with a little work. So that's the way we do leaves. Try to keep these leaves out of the sewers, because if you got a lot of leaves and they're going into the sewer, the next thing you've got is a clogged up sewer. So that's why we pick up leaves and try to encourage you all to do the same. And that's why we continue to pick up the yard waste dumpsters, usually until well into December. I don't know what the date is this year that we're going to pick them up to, but we'll post that as the time gets closer.
We had two questions about police residency, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Since it was signed into law,
Mm-hmm.
have we seen any new applicants yet apply to the police department?
There are always applicants, and from what I understand, we are beginning a recruiting program to recruit more people. It's been in place now for not quite a month, not quite 30 days, maybe 3 weeks, something like that. And so we are recruiting additional officers. We did start a new recruit class last week, I guess it was. Those people were probably in the pipeline beforehand, because it takes a while. When you apply to become a police officer, there's background checks, there's psychological tests, there's home visits. There's a lot of screening that goes into that, so it doesn't happen in a week. Probably takes a month, 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months to do that. So that class was already set up, but we are actively in the process of recruiting and screening additional people. So if you or somebody that you know thinks they may want to be a St. Louis police officer, please go online, go on to the city's website. I think we're going to post a link to it, and apply, because we need the officers. This morning, I get a report every Monday morning telling me how many officers we're short. This morning it was 134. Last week it was 131, I think it was. So that means 3 people have retired or left. And, that's not unusual in a week, because, of course, when you have a big department, people are retiring all the time. But that's why we need officers all the time. So apply.
The second residency question is for any officer we hire who doesn't currently live in the city, will there be training, or do you think training would make a difference to help them make the city feel like it is their community that they live in?
There's a lot of training. There's de-escalation training. There's cultural competency training. And some of that also comes, by the way, in the screening process. And we don't, not everybody makes it through that process. And then, there is continuing ongoing training. To become a police officer in the academy is a little over 6 months. Actually, I guess it's about 7 months, 31, 32 weeks, I think it is. And in the police academy, and then once you graduate from the academy, you get your badge, then you become an officer, and you then are on probation for a year, and you are assigned to someone who's your mentor and who you ride with and who you learn from and that sort of thing.
Last 2 questions. Do you have an update on the downtown cruising safety and barricades in the downtown area?
So this morning, when we reopened Eads Bridge, which we've been doing every Monday morning, Eads Bridge will now remain open all the time, so it will no longer be closing. Some of the other barricades are still in place. They are going to continue for a bit. Washington Avenue, they're closed on weekend evenings, but open the rest of the time. And there's a few other barricades in downtown South Broadway and on 4th Street. That seems to be working pretty well. So at least for right now, we're going to leave that in place.
Last question comes from Pat about the election that's already underway in the city of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
What precautions, if any, or are you worried about voting intimidation or other tactics to try and keep people from going to the polls?
So, we've seen a lot of talk about that, Pat, on national media, national publications about the possibility of voter intimidation at polls. It's not something that we anticipate happening, but it's something that we are prepared for if it is occurring. So I think in general, hopefully that does not happen. But if it does, our law enforcement is prepared to handle that.
That's it for today, Mayor.
That's it for today. Thank you all. Appreciate it. It's a beautiful day out there, just like it was a great weekend. So hope you get out and enjoy the weather a little bit. And thank you so much for being with us.